Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to our second week of online learning. Today we are going to be working on lesson 15 of our Eureka Math lessons. So before we get started, just make sure you have your materials and make sure you also have your booklet for your do now. If you do not have your materials, go ahead and press pause on this video so that you can gather them and then press play again. If you do have your materials, we're going to go ahead and get started already. So remember, today is Monday and we are going to time ourselves and do our do now for our multiplication t-chart. So at this moment, go ahead and pause the video and you're going to time yourself, put your timer for 5 minutes, and you're going to complete Monday's do now. You may begin. Alright, boys and girls. So now that you're done with your do now, we're going to go ahead and begin with our lesson. So make sure you do have your packet where you can write all your notes, your key points, your vocabulary, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and take off the camera for myself and I'm just going to display our work so that you can see better. Alright guys, so again, like I said, today we are doing lesson 15, so go ahead and write that on your notes. And our objective for the day, don't forget to do the title on your work. Today is April 6th, 2020. And our objective, we're going to begin with our objective. The objective for today's lesson is to construct perpendicular line segments on a rectangular grid. That is the objective that we are going to be doing today. Now for today, the only vocabulary word we will use, of course, is going to be perpendicular. And I know we learned this in our previous lesson, but we're just going to write it down to refresh our memories. Lines that intersect and form four right angles. Now for this, I am going to give you an example. So let's say we have something like this. I'm drawing my lines. Remember, this forms a right angle, this forms a right angle, this forms a right angle, and this forms a right angle. So that right there would be considered to be perpendicular lines. Now I'm going to give you another example. Let's say you have a right triangle. The line segments, I'm going to highlight it really quick so you're able to see. These line segments right here are perpendicular. So a right triangle has two line segments that are perpendicular. Why? Because they form the right angle there. And remember, lines go on forever. So these right here are perpendicular, and if these lines were to continue going, then it would be your four right angles, which would be something like this. Now our key points for today's lesson, we're actually just going to have one main key point. So our key point is going to be use your right angle template, identify, create, perpendicular lines. So in today's lesson, we will have to identify and we will have to create perpendicular lines. If I'm going a little fast, you may pause the video to finish writing your notes. Alright, boys and girls, so now that you have finished writing your notes, I actually want you to go into your Eureka Math book and I want you to get the template labeled on the corner. It's going to say Lesson 15, Template 1. That is inside your Eureka book. So just go ahead and tear that out. And that is the template we are going to be using to guide the lesson today. So I'm going to give you just a couple seconds for you to grab that. Okay, so now that you have your template in front of you, we are going to look only at the top part. Right now, we're not going to look at the bottom. We're only going to look at the top. So what I want you to see is we already learned that perpendicular lines form 4 right angles. So just by looking at letter A, B, letter C, and letter D, think for a moment which ones you think are perpendicular. And the ones that you think are perpendicular, on the very top, you can write the letter P. So if you think A is perpendicular, write a letter P. If you think B is perpendicular, you can write a letter P on the top. I'm going to give you about 5-10 seconds to do that. You may pause the video really quick and then you can press play. Okay, so now that you've thought about which ones you think are perpendicular and which ones you think are not, we're going to review them really quick. So remember, our only key point is to use our right angle template to identify or to create perpendicular lines. As a right template, I know that last week we were using a right triangle. If you still have that, you're more than welcome to use that. Remember, you can also use any paper, the edge of the paper. You can just cut the and you can use that as a right angle template. So if you don't have something small or anything like that, maybe one of the old lessons in our Eureka book, you can tear it off. Just make sure that if you do tear off a paper to use, don't use the side with the lines where you ripped it off. It's preferably if you use the one on the outer corner. So for my right template, Ms. Rodriguez is going to use the corner of her ruler. Okay, so for example, letter A. Did you think that one was perpendicular? Yes, very good. Letter A does form perpendicular lines because we can see that this right here is a right angle. And this is also a right angle. This is a right angle and this is a right angle. All of them are right angles. There are 4 right angles and we know that if it forms 4 right angles, it is perpendicular. So A was perpendicular. B, remember what you can also do, for example, here, you can always turn your paper around. If you're not able to do it like this, you can always turn it around. But as you can see, this also forms a right angle. So if it forms a right angle, here we only see one, but remember, lines go on forever. So eventually, if this line goes on forever and this line goes on forever, it would form 4 right angles. So this right here is also perpendicular. Now let's take a look at C. Now, do not let your eyes fool you. Sometimes it's very, very tricky. And you may think, oh, that forms a right angle. Those are perpendicular lines. And it may not. So just be very, very careful. So what Ms. Rodriguez is going to do is she's going to take her ruler, the right angle template, and I am going to measure the angle. And remember that when we are measuring, I'm going to try to put it as close as I can to the camera. Remember, it has to be right on the edge and the line should not cover. So for example, as you see here, the corner of my ruler is right on this line. But if you see the bottom part of the line, it's actually covered in the end. It's not covered right here at the tip, but once I get to the end, you can no longer see the. So would this right here be considered a right angle? No, it would not be considered a right angle. So letter C does not form perpendicular lines. Now we're going to go to D. D, the same thing. I could actually just flip this and look at my angle. Or I can just use my right angle, like my first key point says, to measure. So if I grab my ruler and I put this right where the line is, remember it has to be right in the corner, I can also see that the line over here disappears. That means I'm covering it. It's not there. So if it disappears, would this be considered a right angle? Very good. It's not considered a right angle. So if it does not form a right angle, then this is not a set of perpendicular lines. So letter D is also not perpendicular. So the only ones that form a right angle are A and B. Now we're going to move on to the bottom part of our paper. Alright, so I want everyone to look at number 1. Only at number 1. Alright guys, now, if you look at number 1, I want you to think, and we're going to pretend that this right here is a right triangle. And we're going to pretend that this is our longest side, and this is going to be ST. So what I'm going to do is, what I'm going to do on my paper, but you're going to do it on yours, is we're going to draw some lines, but instead of a straight line, I want you to do it in little dashes like this. And we're going to draw our right triangle. So now that we did that, I want us to label the vertex of the right angle R. Go ahead and label that. And then we're going to label our acute angles right here. This one on the bottom is going to be S. And this one right here is going to be T. Go ahead and do that on your work. Alright, now that you did that, I want you guys to look at your right triangle. And what I notice about this right triangle is that it has a base. This is our base of 3 units. And it has a height of 2 units. So all I am going to do is now I am going to rotate my triangle. I'm going to pretend like I'm going to rotate it. And now instead of having a base of 3, I'm going to rotate it into a base of 2. So if I rotate it, now my base is going to be 2. And I'm going to draw dashed lines for this. These are my 2 units right here. And my height now is going to be 3. Again, I'm using my dashed lines. And I'm going to stop right there because these are my 3 units right here. I'm going to use my ruler really quick to draw the longest part of the triangle. There we go. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to label this triangle the same way as I did this. So my right angle is going to be R. This acute angle here is S. And this one here is T. So go ahead and do that on yours as well. Alright, so now that we did this, boys and girls, like I said, all we did was we had a right triangle here, we rotated it, and now that I rotated it, I'm going to do my first key point, which is I'm going to use my ruler, my right angle template, and I'm going to measure it to see if I created a perpendicular line. And as you can see, oops, I'm sorry, let me move my paper. There, perfect. So I'm going to get my ruler and I am measuring to make sure I created a set of perpendicular lines. And I want you to tell me, did Ms. Rodriguez make perpendicular lines? Yes. Very good. Alright guys, so now that we did that, we're going to go to number 2. So for number 2, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to pretend that this right here forms a right triangle, and this is my longest side. So again, I'm going to go ahead and draw out my triangle. Remember, I do, you do, so do this with me. But I'm going to use dashed lines. And I am going to make my pretend right triangle. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to label my right angle with R. This acute angle will be S. And this acute angle will be T. Now for this, guys, my base is 5 units and my height is 2 units. So remember, I'm going to rotate it. So if my height was 2 units, now my base is going to be 2 units. So this is going to be my base right here, 2 units. And now my height is going to be 5 units. Remember, all I'm doing is rotating. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right there. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler. Remember, you can use a paper. I'm going to draw my line. So now I already did my other right triangle. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to label R. This right here is going to be S. And this right here is going to be T. So now I'm going to do my first key point again. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm just going to make sure that I did form perpendicular lines and I did it correctly. So if I get my ruler, I am able to see that it did form a right angle. Sorry, right there. It has to be right on the edge. But as you can see, I'm still able to see this line and I'm still able to see this line. So therefore, they are perpendicular lines. Now what I want you to do is I want you to work on 3 and 4. So right now, go ahead and press pause on the video. Work on 3 and 4. Do the same thing. You know, pretend this is your right triangle and pretend this is your right triangle. And go ahead and create perpendicular lines to your right triangle. When you are done, you may press play to check your answers. Alright, boys and girls, so now you can check your work, and your work should have looked something like this for 3 and for 4. So both of them were perpendicular, so this forms a right angle. So now that we've done all 4, you're going to go back to your Eureka book, and I want you guys to work on your problem set. It's problem number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. Very similar to last week's problems, but instead of parallel, we are now working with perpendicular lines. And then you're also going to complete your exit ticket for lesson 15. Come back to the camera. One second. Alright, I'm back. Okay, boys and girls, so again, just remember today now we're working with perpendicular lines. So the lessons are very similar. Last week, your exit ticket and your problem set were very similar, but last week we were working more with parallel lines. Now we're working with perpendicular lines. So go ahead and do your problem set and your exit ticket. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Thank you guys and have a great day.